Here's the floor to Mr. Rajdeep Sardesai.
Thanks, Devash. That was a good Instagram kind of introduction, short and sweet, which is a pleasant change from generally how introductions are made, and which really typifies, I guess, the energy and the new age spirit of this room. So, thank you very much, each and every one of you, for coming here on this rain-soaked day in Mumbai. When Devash told me about this about a month ago, I was ready to come, but I was in the midst of writing a book. And when you're writing a book, you're sort of so immersed in it that you don't think of anything else. I still haven't finished, and I have a deadline by the 15th of August to give the book in. But he was from Campion, he's from my house in Campion School. And if there's one thing I can never say no to is someone who's from my own house in Campion, even though I passed out in 81 and he passed out in 2013. So those are the bonds that are tough to break. Plus the idea that you could be in Mumbai talking to young people and maybe getting some of their energy into you, so that when you want to write your book, you have a fresh lease of energy to finish up. Writing a book, trust me, is the most lonely, difficult experience that you can go through. I've been going at this for 18 months, and I wrote a book on the 2014 elections called 2014, the election that changed India. I then wrote a book on the 2019 election, how Modi won India, and I thought I'd finish the trilogy by writing this book, which the tentative title is The Election That Surprised India. But it was an effort that's taken me to get up every morning at 5 a.m. just to write, because the best time, I think, to do most work in India is early morning. In fact, I think if there's one thing that you can learn from a generation several generations before us and you, it's their incredible ability to get up at 5 and 5:30 in the morning and finish off most of what we start off at 9 o'clock. They used to go to sleep, I guess, by 10, and therefore had that 7-8 hours of sleep, but incredibly did all this work in the morning. You read all the great scriptures of this country, and the idea is that the mornings is the best time to really get your act together. I don't know whether that's the new generation mantra. You all hit the gym in the mornings. These guys used to do all their other stuff, and thereby were incredibly productive in their times. I was asking Devash what I should speak of, and he said, why don't you speak about your journey? And I said, fine. But trust me, my journey, and I gave a couple of examples, is the wrong journey for anyone embarking on entrepreneurship. Because every time I've advised a young entrepreneur, I've got it horribly wrong. I told these young IITians who wanted to start something in the realm of giving 50-word stories, breaking down every story into 50 words, I said, that's not journalism. They ended up starting India's most successful news app called In Shorts. Many years ago, Narendra Modi, whom I knew well because we had a couple of common friends, told me he was going to start this T20 league. And I told him, this is Mickey Mouse cricket, it's never going to work. And he actually offered us the Delhi team. I was at that time one of the co-promoters of Network 18. And he told us, why don't you all take the Delhi team? A media company like yours will be an ideal fit. And I remember we discussed it and eventually said, it's never going to really work. And every time I think of Lalit Modi and I look at the IPL on the screen, I say, I could have been there. And had a slice of the action, because he was incredible. I mean, he got it right and got lucky, like many people do. If India hadn't won that 2007 T20 World Cup, I'm not so sure that it would have been as big just a year later. And there are a couple of other examples that I've given of young people who I have advised, and they've gone on to bigger and better things. So don't go by anything I say. Chase your dreams the way you want to chase them, in the belief that you have it in you, you have a great idea that's going to actually disrupt the marketplace. I started off more traditionally. I came back from Oxford with a law degree. I joined a law firm where one of my fellow juniors is now the Supreme Court of India's Chief Justice. And Dhananjay Chandrachud and I sat next to each other, and you see where he is and where I am. And he stuck to the law. I just thought it was extremely tough and difficult to be at the Bombay High Court and do all of that. I had this, what we would call news ka keeda. You know, there was this great passion. I still remember for some bizarre reason, but it is a memory. There's a USIS somewhere in New Marine Lines. And I remember as an 11-year-old spending a complete week watching a US presidential election between Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. And, you know, tracking all those elections at the age of 11. I still have the scrapbook somewhere. Georgia, who's leading, in Oklahoma, don't ask me why I did it, but I did it. And in 1977, when Indira Gandhi lost a famous election against all expectation, I remember being very excited by it and trying to tell all my friends in school that this is, you know, a terrific event. So I was obsessed with news, and I still am. And if there's any reason why from 1988 to now in 2024, which is 36 years, I'm still doing a bit of it, it's because I get excited by the idea of news. It's got me into trouble at times, because at a similar gathering, this time of journalists, I said something which has then been grossly misinterpreted, because in your generation, all you need to do is take 30 seconds clips and make it look very different to what I intended to do. I'll tell you the story, but I hope this time that the story, you know, actually communicates what I was trying to say even then. And it is one of the reasons why I believe this is the only country I would still do journalism in. It was a Friday. It was 2001 December. And Fridays, I used to cover Parliament I was at NDTV, which hadn't yet become a 24-hour news channel on its own. We were part of the Star network. And we used to, generally there was less competition, so no pressure of breaking news as it is now. It was a Friday afternoon, and a Friday morning around 11 o'clock, and we were going to Parliament, me and my camera person. And my camera person said, "Sir, you know, nothing happens in Parliament on Friday, all these MPs go home. Why don't we also take a nice lunch break today? You know, the press club has some wine afternoon or whatever. Sir, wo karte hain. I'll bring, wahan se mere dost ne wine lai hai. We can even have it in the garden outside Parliament in the..." Sure. Sounds like an idea. If nothing happens in Parliament, that is a great plan to have. Within 10 minutes of that conversation, we were entering Parliament when there was the shot of gunfire. And there was a terror attack in Parliament. And for the next 24 hours, all we were doing was covering this attack. And one of my other colleagues, who was a camera person, had a bullet which went through his camera lens. Another cameraman from another channel got an injury on his leg, never recovered, and passed away a few years later. But I must confess, and I told this story to the journalists, while the rest of the world saw this as this horrific day where Parliament had been targeted, which it was, and it was a horrific day, for me there was an adrenaline rush that here I was covering this attack on Parliament. And there was no other place that I wanted to be than that. And I still remember, and this is what got me into trouble. One of the guards said, "Yaar, aap log bahar jaiye. If you want to stay in, you are doing it at your own risk. You will be, you know, I would advise you, once we close the gates, we are not opening them again." And I told them, "Ha, gate band kar dijiye." Because one of the thoughts that we had in the mind, if the gates were closed and we were the only channel covering it, no one else could. And thereby, we would have, in a strange way, the choice was to leave and not be part of the story, or the choice was to be there and cover the story. And I thought it was, you know, it was just a no-brainer. Now, whether it was journalism ka keeda, or whether it was competition, it's just the way it is. And each and every one of us in this room has something that drives us. For someone, it could be the idea that I want to be a billionaire by the age of 30. For someone else, it could be just the idea that you want to get some, whatever you want to call it, fame, notoriety. For someone else, it could be giving back to society. We all have our own motivations. And I think one of the things you learn as you get older is not to be judgmental about someone else. If someone else wants to chart his or her own path, it need not be your path. So you have every reason to disagree with what I did that day in Parliament and could say you're a vulture. And I believe journalists are vultures. Let any real journalist come and tell me he's being dishonest and say I don't want to be there where there is a terror attack. Then you're not really into journalism. There is no, that is the nature of this business. I'll give you another example, and sometimes, I cite this because over the years it has haunted me, and I'll tell you why later. But in 2002, again not too long ago, in fact 2001-2 was a very traumatic period for journalism. Lots of things happened, which was not bad because suddenly we had decided to make NDTV into a 24/7 channel. All we wanted were lots of news. So one morning, on the 27th of February, I think it was, I get a call from a journalist friend, and one of the things you do as you grow is create these contacts of stringers and retainers in every district. And this was a Gujarati friend of mine from Rajkot. Ring me, Rajdeep bhai, वो ट्रेन में जहाँ कार सेवक थे, वो ट्रेन जलाई गई है. And I said, are you sure? He said, हाँ sir, मैं 100% पुलिस से चेक किया है. So we went with the breaking story of that, of car sevaks being attacked in a train at Godhra. Now, this was 27th, and in those days, the budget used to be on the 28th of February. Now it's on the 1st of Feb. It used to be those days 28th at 11 in the morning. Or, 11 in the morning, 28th. They moved the time also. Earlier it used to be at 5 p.m. It was moved to 11 in the morning. So, on the 27th, with the train being burnt, next day was the budget, and I was supposed to be outside Parliament giving some whatever gyan. I knew very little about the budget, even though I was an economics graduate, but I was being forced to do that. 27th evening, I get a call from an old police contact friend of mine in Ahmedabad. My grandfather used to be a police officer in Gujarat, long retired, but had a reputation of a strong officer. He had lots of young colleagues who admired him. And one of them rings me up and says, Rajdeep bhai, the VHP has declared a ban tomorrow in Ahmedabad. आप आ जाइए, मुझे लगता है यहाँ कुछ होगा. Now, all my other colleagues were also excited by wanting to cover the story, but they thought the story was in Ayodhya, where the car sevaks had left in that train to go back to Gujarat. They thought that there would be lots of action, to use the word, in Ayodhya. So most of them said, we want to go to Ayodhya. But because this police officer told me this, I went to Dr. Pranay Roy and said, look, I don't want to do this budget tomorrow. This guy is saying something may happen in Ahmedabad. Can I go there? And as it turned out, I took a 6 or 7 a.m. flight to Ahmedabad and spent the next 1 month and frankly the next 1 year of my life just covering what happened in Gujarat. I knew a bit of Gujarati. My grandparents had lived there. I knew the land. I'm born in Ahmedabad. But it was just 1 year which changed my life because Narendra Modi and I used to be great friends till that day of 28th February or 27th February. And suddenly a relationship which used to, he and I were sort of Gujarati and Maharashtrian stuck in Delhi in the 1990s, so we would have kadi chawal and all together. From there we became chief minister versus a journalist questioning the chief minister. And while the relationship has had its ups and downs, he was the first to call me up when my father passed away. That 1 year, had I not gone to Ahmedabad and instead gone to Ayodhya and someone else would have gone there, that person would have been the face of that story and the rest is history. And even after all these years, in 2024, a lot of people still from that generation identify me with that coverage that we did in Gujarat. It was the first televised riot. It was the first riot in the age of television. And if I step back, maybe I did a few things wrong. You don't cover a riot live, but you're caught in that moment and you're showing images. You don't have time to press the pause button. But that's the way it was. The irony is that the most traumatic experience for me as a journalist was not Gujarat 2002, but Mumbai 92-93. In all the journalism that I've ever done, those 3 months between December of 92 and March of 93 are easily the most difficult months that I had as a journalist. I was in the Times of India, there was no television, there was no breaking news, and therefore people perhaps don't remember it in the way they remember the visual image of Gujarat. And there was a Congress government. You see, I keep telling people, it was a BJP government in Gujarat 2002 and we raised the questions to them. There was a Congress government here and we raised even more questions to the point where Sharad Pawar threw me out of a press conference here. I was young, 27, heading a very young team of journalists, and between that day of December 6, 1992, which was a Sunday, I still remember I was playing a cricket match and my office had given me Sundays Times of India didn't work basically. And there was this car seva going on in Ayodhya. And most people said, yeah, jo bhi hoga, Ayodhya mein hoga. And I came back to the office at 12 o'clock because there were no mobiles then. Someone came to the ground at Azad Maidan to tell me, sir, aap zara office aa jaiye, wo masjid gir gayi hai, aur hame to, we'll have to follow up the story. So we thought all we were going to do was follow up the story. The story was in Ayodhya. I remember ringing up Murli Deora, Milind Deora's father, who was then an MP, saying, sir, can you give us a reaction? And he said, please don't disturb me, I'm playing bridge. And one of the stories we did, which got him upset, was we said Murli plays bridge while Bombay burns. But that's another day, You see, when you're young, you do things, right? Because I remember ringing him out 3 times, each time he said, I'm playing bridge. As it turned out, not too far away from the Times of India building in Victoria Terminus, or what Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus now, the first gun shots, and there was violence at 11 p.m. that evening in Mohammad Ali Road. And you had this riot which completely took everyone by surprise. And for me, a South Mumbai kid, it woke me up. For me, life was Campion School, playing cricket, enjoying life. Suddenly I was at Antop Hill, watching Hindus and Muslims virtually in these face-to-face. It was horrific. There was no television camera, so we couldn't capture it. We wrote a book called When Bombay Burned, which I think was a very good book, but nobody read it because nobody knew us. And in those days, even fewer people read books because the book publishers also published only 1,000 copies. You can still catch it. The reason I say you should still read it because today's generation should know what happened then. Because not only was there a riot in December, but Mumbai was the only place where a riot took place in January. One was because a masjid was broken, it became Muslims versus police. In January, the riot that took place was a full-blown communal riot. And do you know the reason for it, or my suspicion for it, is that riot was engineered by the underworld in collaboration with politicians to ensure that large parts which were slum areas were evicted of those people. A number of Muslim families in that period moved out to a place called Mundra, not far away from Mumbai. And guess what is that priceless piece of real estate, which I remember a chief minister who was removed at the time telling me that was the reason for the riot, is where you now have the BKC.
Wow.
And that is the story. And I'll tell you something else which got me into trouble at that time. When in March, 2 months after January, you have the Mumbai blast, which is the single most traumatic day that I had gone through as a journalist. I remember I was with my dentist, and in the morning, I went to Murli Deora's house, the same Murli Deora, his office here at Khaitan Bhavan opposite Eros Cinema. And remember, this is pre-mobile days. Murli gets a call on the phone, Murli Bhai gets a call on the phone that there has been a blast at Bombay Stock Exchange. And he said, Rajdeep, chalo, chalte hain. And I went with him in the car, and it was a sight that, shook us all because we hadn't really, Mumbai, terror, riot thi ke now terror, and the people's bodies strewn around there. And while we are there, we heard, because remember no mobile phone, we heard there has been a blast at Air India. Before that, next thing we know there has been a blast at Javeri Bazaar. Then you know there has been a blast at Sea-Rock. This was, and we had no facilities, no cameras, no hundreds of people around. And I will never forget that night, we put the paper to bed, headline, midline, Mumbai blasted and all. And we went and had a drink at Leopold's. And I just wondered what had happened. As time went on, one of the police commissioners there, a very fine Sardar, told us that he suspected the hand of the underworld again and that it could have been Dawood Ibrahim. And the reason why that struck me, and I wrote a piece about it, was because I had met Dawood, I had seen Dawood Ibrahim 6 months earlier in September 92 at an India-Pakistan match in Sharjah. And guess what? At that match, and you can bring all the Indian players who were there then, Dawood Ibrahim was rooting for India and had actually promised all the players a Toyota car each if they beat Pakistan. And Bal Thackeray, Uddhav's father, who was then the Shiv Sena founder, used to then at that time say a true test of a patriotic Muslim is if when India is playing Pakistan, you wave the Indian flag. And I wrote this piece in the Times of India called Muslims in the Blast, saying by Bal Thackeray's definition of patriotism, Dawood Ibrahim is a patriot. And I asked myself, what is it that changed between September of 92 and March of 93 for Dawood Ibrahim, who claimed to root for India, to suddenly blast the city that he was born in or had spent all his life in? And what happened was a masjid was demolished. That event changed a lot of lives. And it, as I said, changed my lives in a way, but that was traumatic. However, because there was no television camera, none of this is really part of living memory of even Indians of that generation. Forget about your generation. Most of you are probably born after 93, or some of you certainly are. But I think it's important. And years later, I took my children to see a film called Sanju. And my daughter comes out and says, did all of that really happen? So I said, okay, I will rewrite what I had written then. I wrote 2,000 words that night about the story of Sanjay Dutt, which was again a bizarre story when you think about it. Here was a film star keeping AK-47s in his garage because he thought that he was going to be attacked or he was getting threatening calls. The truth is, Mumbai's chickens came home to roost in the early 90s. An entire underworld, politician, crime nexus came, and corporate India, films, all of it came to roost. And the 90s was that decade. Now, today's generation has moved on to better things and brighter things, and hopefully we've left that behind. But it is, I think, the point I was trying to make is if you want to be a journalist, you've got to be excited by all of this. If you want to be anything the passion has to come from within you for doing something which you think defines you. No one else can decide that for you. I was trained to be a lawyer, as I said in 88, come back here, find the law, not so exciting. And I've always believed if there's nothing else you're good at, there's always journalism. So in 88, when I was struggling and trying to think what else comes next, I said, no, I used to write from Oxford, a letter from Oxford, and that editor of Times of India, when I came back, said, Honey, come back, you write well, why don't you become an assistant editor? And I thought, that's great, that's next to an editor is the assistant editor. Little did I know that there were lots of people between us. But that always happens later. But the truth of the matter is, I had grown up wanting to be a cricketer. My late father was a cricketer for India, quite incredibly, is the only Goa-born cricketer to play for this country. And was born in Goa in 1940, which is Portuguese ruled, where there was nothing like cricket at that time in Goa, there was only football. But for some reason, my father and his cousins played cricket. One day the Reserve Bank of India team comes to Goa in 1956 and my father is a 16-year-old on a railway track ground scores 100 against them. And the Reserve Bank of India captain comes to my dad and to my dad's elder brother and says, why don't you bring this boy to Bombay, we'll make him a good cricketer. In those days, if you lived in Goa, you needed a permit to come to Mumbai because Goa was still Portuguese ruled. It took 6 months for my father's elder brother to get him a permit. He comes here, he had never seen a cricket ground till the age of 17. At 21, he was playing for India. And the only reason was that he had a lot of people who helped him out. I mean, a lot of very kind people who came and saw talent in him. No nepotism, nothing. No one knew him from Adam. I've always said when you play sport, sport is the one thing. When you look at these Olympians, you realize sport is that one human field of endeavor where there is nothing like nepotism. I remember desperately wanting to be a cricketer and scoring a few runs, and each time I'd tell my dad what is missing. And he said, when you go on the ground, I ain't playing for you. You have to have the fire in the belly and more importantly, the talent to do it. It is nothing, you can be anyone's son or daughter. You can be a film star, you can be Abhishek Bachchan, you can be Tushar Kapoor because Jitendra was a film star, because Amitabh was a film star, you can become a film star. But no sports person in this country can become a sportsman for his or sportswoman for their country only because their parents did it. In that sense, sports is very liberating. My experience with sport those 10 years was traumatic. I desperately wanted to do it and I wasn't good enough. And I played this one match against Pakistan for combined universities in England, and I was bowled for one by Abdul Qadir, this great leg spinner. And as I was going out, one of the Pakistanis turns to me and says, you come from India and you can't play spin bowling. Yaar, tu India se aata aur spin bowling bhi nahi khelna chahta. That's the day I decided I needed to do something else in life. I was 21 and the last thing I needed was a Pakistani to sledge me on a cricket field. And then law, and then journalism happened. And because that age of 88 to 94 was this traumatic period with all these events happening in Mumbai, one thing led to another. And in 94 I moved to Delhi, and I met Prannoy Roy, who said he wanted to start a 24/7 channel. And as I said, nobody thought that a 24/7 channel was going to be watched by anyone. In fact, we didn't even, the original idea was to do one program on Doordarshan. 24/7 happened much later. So we had one program called The World This Week, which would be a weekly highlight of all the world news, most of the clips taken from global channels and put together on Doordarshan. And the first private news program that we got a contract for from Doordarshan was for a 20-minute bulletin. And that too, the bulletin would be on a tape. The tape would then be taken on scooter to the Doordarshan office. Someone would see that tape and decide whether you could actually, that story could be carried or not. In fact, the first time, our contract was for a show called News Tonight. People should know how the television revolution in this country started. So it was February of 95. The program contract, government order on Doordarshan, 20-minute program called News Tonight. Till then, all we would have is official Doordarshan would do a Hindi and English news which we grew up on. 20 minutes Hindi, 20 minutes English. The anchor would have flies around her, she would swat them. They were all very professional. But that's what they would do. So February we get this contract. On the day that the first program was to come out, at 4 p.m. we get a call from the Prime Minister's office. Narasimha Rao used to be Prime Minister, to Dr. Roy, saying we cannot allow this program. Who gave you the permission? So we said we've got a written letter. Nothing doing. News is a government monopoly. No private company can have a news show. Now we had hired a team, we had done all this stuff. I had actually gone to Gujarat February 95, and there's my Modi connection again. For the first time the BJP was about to win an election there. I had gone, reported it, we'd come back. In those days everything was manual, we didn't have these OB vans, or now you can do everything out of your mobile. Program was ready, and here is a government official saying no, news is a government monopoly. Now the good thing about bureaucrats is that they can create problems but also find the solutions. So 1 hour later that same guy rings up saying, okay, we've had a rethink. You can have the program but you will have to remove the word news. It will be called current affairs. So we said, how do we do it? He said the name of the program must change from News Tonight to Tonight. So for the next 3 hours, between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m, what are we doing? Removing the word news wherever it is. In graphics, in that. Now I had a problem because I had gone to Porbandar to cover this Gujarat election, and I had come back and saying, Rajdeep Sardesai reporting for News Tonight. So the editor comes and tells me, sir, वो आपका नहीं जा पाएगा क्योंकि वो आपने news word use किया. मैंने कहा कुछ भी हो, मेरा चेहरा जाना है. तुम अब कुछ. So if you see that first program, I hope NDTV has the clip. It says Rajdeep Sardesai blipped tonight. So the word news was blipped. Now, that's not the only story. The same officer who had stopped us later on puts a rule that you can't have uplinking out of India. That your signal, no signals can be uplinked through satellite and brought back into India. Uplinking is only the government will decide. Fortunately, live sports was being allowed at the time. And the BCCI, God bless them, went to the court and said, how can you force us to only give this feed to Doordarshan? So there's a famous Hero Cup judgment which opened up the airwaves suddenly. And that gave us a break which otherwise we would not have got. All these 400 news channels and other satellite networks are all because of that rule that allowed us suddenly to open up the airwaves. Had that not happened, you wouldn't have had so many channels. And the best news is that that officer who had stopped it was from Andhra Pradesh. And today the highest number of private news channels are in Andhra Pradesh. I hope he watches them. They're all in Telugu. I mean, this is a bizarre country where you have 400 news channels. Frankly, it makes no sense. But people have got into it because from 95 onwards, as the revolution started growing, people thought, yeah, why not start a TV channel? So you had people from real estate wanting to get some legitimacy. Chalo yaar, news channel shuru karte hain. And typical of the government of India, first having put restrictions, they opened up everything. So didn't put even proper rules for licensing. So you actually have all kinds of people today who have ownership of channels. To the point, of course, now where you have the big Adanis and Ambanis also in the news business. And once the big guys enter, what space for small guys like us? So in 95, from 95 to 2005, I was with it. 94 to 2005, I was with NDTV. In 2005, much like you young people, I decided I wanted to be, if not an entrepreneur, at least someone who could claim that, I have a channel of my own. And from that founding team of NDTV, I decided, along with a colleague who was the finance director at NDTV, that we will go ahead, tie up with Network 18. In turn, we went to Atlanta and then tied up with CNN, got a co-branding arrangement with them, and we created CNN IBN, CNBC TV 18, tying up with CNBC. That had happened a few years earlier, and then we went into other languages. And for 9 years, we were reasonably successful in creating what we thought was a potential world-class network. 2014, government changes. Mr. Modi becomes Prime Minister. I guess some old wounds are haunt us still. And within a week of that result, Mr. Ambani, who we had gone to take a loan because of the 2008 financial crash had sort of hobbled us financially, decides to take us over because he had options to do so. And the rest is history. I had to leave. And then I decided to do my other stuff, writing, and go to India today to just do my show the way I wanted to. But it just shows in life, it's best to live in the moment and take life as it comes. If I had overthought in 94, 95, I don't think I would have ever gone into television. If I had overthought in 2005, I would have been very comfortable in NDTV. If I hadn't thought when the Ambanis took over 2014 what lies ahead, I wouldn't have left and carved out whatever I wanted to do on my own. And who knows what tomorrow brings. My contract with India today ends at the end of this month. And who knows, we'll do something else in life. Life is a journey. I keep telling the young people that I've worked with, never treat life as a destination. There is no Everest that you have to climb. You don't have to climb Everest every day. You just have to take one step at a time. And in fact, a mountaineer famously said the most difficult part of climbing Everest is just those last 10 steps. And more than that, it is the journey that is far more important than the destination itself. In fact, a sadhu at the Kumbh Mela once gave me this life lesson. And the sadhus at the Kumbh are just these great guys. They have charas in the day. And they are sadhus jumping into the cold water in January at the Kumbh Mela. And I remember one of them was once having something which looked very strange. And I asked him, what did he have? Ghee, pure ghee. You're just gulping it down. But they were these, many of them are philosophical. And one of the philosophies they have in life is just focus on the journey and not the destination. And I think that is something which each and every one of you in this room should recognize. There will be bad days, there will be good days. And the challenge is to take the bad days with the same sort of spirit that you're able to take the good days with. It's never going to be a smooth run all the time. There will always be roadblocks, there will be always speed breakers. things will go wrong. I was suspended from my channel for a month or 3 weeks in 2021 January. I write about all of this in the book. You must read it when it comes out in October. In fact, Devansh has promised that he will bring me back and get all of you to buy the book. But you must, because there is the story in 2021. There's a Republic Day parade is taken over by farmers, Kisan agitation. And suddenly I find myself again at the wrong place at the wrong time, or right place at the right time, in the middle of this violence that the Kisans are doing. And one man is lying in the middle of the road, blood streaming out of his head. And the people around him claimed he had been shot by the police. And that's exactly what I said, that these people are claiming he has been shot by the police. As it turned out, the police had their own version of events, which is that the man had fallen off a tractor and that had caused the injury. But because you're in a live situation, you say things in that live situation. I may have been wrong, I concede. Should I have been suspended for it? Jury is out. Within few days of that, the government of India filed sedition charges against me, Shashi Tharoor and a few others for tweeting about it. The case is still there in the Supreme Court. Because in this wonderful country, the Supreme Court at one level says sedition laws have to be removed of the statute books, but have still not done enough to do so. But you go through the trauma, the agony, the shame, call it what you want. I don't like to use the word shame. There's nothing like shame in ये सब होता रहता है life में. But you lose out on your reputation in a way. But फिर सुबह होगी. In this wonderful land, there is always morning. Anywhere in the world, there's always morning. And as long as you go with that spirit, that and our Hindi film writers are wonderful with all these words. जिंदगी एक सफर है सुहाना, यहाँ कल क्या हो किसने जाना. Who knows what tomorrow brings? And I want to leave you therefore with a story which again comes from that, as I said, the most traumatic day in my life in March as a journalist, most traumatic day as a journalist, in March of 93, on the day of the blast. And it's a life lesson. Because if this story doesn't tell you what life is about, nothing else will. And I found out about it a couple of days after the blast. One of the blasts took place not too far away from where we are at the moment. Worli, of course, now Century Bazaar. Lower Parel is now Upper Worli. That time there was only Worli. And all this area, in fact that's the other point, all this area where we are including were all mill lands. And there was Lal Bagh and Parel were all Shiv Sena strongholds. And a lot of the violence in the second phase took place not too far away from here. So one of the blasts takes place near Century Bazaar, near the passport office at Worli.
That's when the Crompton building was being built.
That's right.
And one of the fellows were blown out of the bus onto that site.
That's right. Now what happens there is that there is a family which was on one side of the road. There's a traffic light if you see there, near that Satyam cinema side. So they were a family of 4. Kid, a son, daughter, mother, father. And the light was green and the son rushes across to the other side. From one side of the road, rushes across to the other side. And the father screams at the son and says, "Hala tula maraitse ka? Do you want to die that you are running across the road?" 20 seconds after, the father had said this, the blast takes place in a bus, which is moving past there. The bus blast is so shattering that it also it's so intense it kills a couple of the passerbys. Those passerbys included the mother, the sister, and the father. The boy who had run across to the other side of the road was saved because he wasn't on the side where his parents were. This was a story told to me by that boy when I met him in the hospital a few days later. Now what can it be? But there is a force above us all who has decided your time has come and yours has not. And then in the daily grind of life and the running of life, when we think, yaar, ye nahi hua, wo nahi hua, ye kab hoga, ye kyo nahi hua. I just think that there are forces above us all. And it is for us, therefore, to use every moment that we have in life to live it to the fullest. And do not try to control your life with that micromanagement style in the belief that, or believe that you are God in some way, and that no one can touch you. Because there are forces above us all. And therefore, if we just stay with our feet on the ground and live in the moment, I think we will be able to take the ups and downs of life far more easily than we are if we are in this constant bhag-dod, the rush of life. How do I get to this point within the shortest possible time? The great poet, lyricist and film director Gulzar Saab has a lovely word. It's only in Hindi that you get these magical words called Therav, which essentially means pause button. And he said, Rajdeep ji, aaj ke generation mein thoda pause button bhi kabhi dabana chahiye. Because the ability to reflect, to think back, to analyze is sometimes missing. And it's only when you can press that pause button in life that you can perhaps understand the fullness of what life is about. And that pause button could be just admiring the rains passing by. I mean, I come back to Mumbai every month for the rain because I just want to see those lovely clouds drifting by. But at the same time, you recognize, as we saw this week in Wayanad, that what can be a beauteous sight for me by Marine Drive can be traumatic for someone else when an entire village is destroyed by that same monsoon gushing by the Arabian Sea. That is life, my friends. Celebrate it, enjoy it, respect it. Thank you very much. Sorry, I overshot my time.
That's okay, we still have a little bit of time left. Can I have a shairi in Hindi to give him a tribute? Sir, काम करो ऐसा पहचान बन जाए, काम करो ऐसा पहचान बन जाए, हर कदम ऐसे रखो कि निशान बन जाए, जिंदगी हर कोई यूं ही काट लेता है, but लाइफ जियो ऐसे कि मिसाल बन जाए. You are one of the living examples, sir. And for me, it is one of my memorable experience. In your speech, I feel that you are very lively. You are a young man of 18 years, exuding passion, exuding confidence, exuding something new.
How old are you?
I'm 28 years old, mentally and physically 68, sir.
So I'm 59 going on 18. But yeah, just stay young. The only way to stay young is be around young people and enjoy the ideas that you guys have. I've always believed you are the lucky generation. When I think, writing a book is so much easier today. I don't use AI or ChatGPT, but I certainly use Google. And every morning I say, Google Namo Shivaya. You want to know what happened in 2021 on this day in COVID, kitne log mare the, what did WHO say? Just do WHO COVID and you'll find it somewhere. Please think about what my parents' generation or my grandparents' generation did when they were writing books. They had to actually go to the library and do their own research. And they wore it very lightly. I give the example. My father played cricket for India in the 1960s. They used to be paid $250 per test match. Which is, somebody said, inflation, by then it was 10,000. I said, okay, 10,000. Please tell me now you're getting 8 crores for winning some World Cup. For winning the World T20. And by the way, I have a photo at home. My dad was part of the team in 1971 that beat England and West Indies for the first time in their countries. They got a bigger motorcade, they got a bigger reception than what you saw in the World T20, much bigger. This was only from Trident to Wankhede Stadium. They got a reception from Mumbai airport all the way up to CCI. And if you see the pictures, every corner of Mumbai was lined up. But they got no money for it. All they got was one suit piece from Thackerseys. Some quality competition had given them some 2,000 rupees from quality and something else. But remember, they got 250 rupees a test match for 5 days. And in 1956, when India beat New Zealand in 3 days, the same BCCI gave the players 150 rupees. And so one of the players went and said, sir, but we are owed 250 rupees a test match, you're giving us 150. And the board official told them, who told you to win a match in 3 days? Effectively treating them as dehadis. I told this story not to you, I told this also to Virat Kohli. And the only reason I told this to Virat Kohli, I was writing a book on cricket called Democracy's 11, which you should read again. But to tell Virat, and I think to his great credit he understood, that every generation is carrying a baton that has been handed over by the previous generation. See yourselves as part of a baton relay. Do not think that cricket started only with Virat Kohli. And Virat understood it. And I've seen in him this enormous respect that he has for the game, that he's so brilliant in playing. And that is what I think makes greatness. When you recognize you're part of a chain, you're not on your own. Particularly in a team sport. And that there were people who actually, I have another story in that book. There were the greatest cricketers of that time, were not paid on time for one of the test matches. They were to take a train. In those days, they all traveled by train. They had to take a train from Delhi to Mumbai, and they did not have money to do that whole journey. That time there was no Rajdhani, so the train took 3 days also. And the board official came running on at the last moment, and all the players were made to sit on the railway platform, and the 2 rupee notes were distributed to them. And all these guys were as great as they come. Only 11 guys play for a country, whether in 1950s or whether in 2024. But those great cricketers had to sit on a railway platform and get their 2 rupee notes. From there to today, the world has changed, and for the better. It's like journalists. You know, when I started in journalism in 1988, there was only the typewriter. And we did our stories. And I'll tell you an incredible story. I should say it because it really will tell you how much the world has changed. So in 1993, as I said, these years of 92, 93 were traumatic. In September, October of 93, I might be wrong with my month, there was a terrible earthquake in a place called Latur in Maharashtra, which is not too far away from Aurangabad. So I was again excited, कीड़ा था. So I told my afsar, मुझे जाना है वहाँ. तो we managed to get a late night train to Aurangabad. Trains also were slow in those days. We reached Aurangabad next day. 10 hours journey, reached Aurangabad next day. Now we reach Aurangabad, all communication lines broken down. Latur is about 5 hours away from Aurangabad, 5.5 hours. Those days roads are also terrible. आज तो तुम्हारे गडकरी के highways हैं. So we had pothole roads. We had to reach Latur. We managed to reach Latur. Next day, by the time it was 6, 7 in the evening, one local guy who I knew through my Marathi network took me to this village called Killari. Much like Wayanad, the entire village had been flattened. All we could see was the stench of dead bodies. 7,000-8,000 people, maybe even more, had died just in Killari village. I was with a photographer, no camera, no video camera, photographer. We took pictures, this, that. Now we have to go back, all communication line broken. From Latur, we go back to Aurangabad. Reach Aurangabad, hoping that we will find some way we can tell the story. No mobile phones. How do I tell people that I've just been to a village where 10,000 people have died? By then we are already on 1.5 days because we have come back. It's late night, edition closes at 11. We missed one more day's edition. Finally, we found a cracking telex line. I don't know how many of you know what telex is. Where you have to type it out and the tele operator would then put out what you were saying to your headquarters. That telex line was barely working. It took us a couple of hours. My cameraman's pictures could not go. My cameraman gave the film roll to a taxi driver. We paid him 100 rupees extra, which in those days was a lot of money. And told him, you have to drive to VT here, to our office here. That took him another 12 hours. This entire process meant that it took about 48 to 72 hours before the world knew that an earthquake had taken place in Latur, where an entire village had been flattened and 10,000 people had died. Now put yourself in 2024. Each and every one of you is a citizen journalist. You will take this mobile out, take all the pictures, uplink it on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, every possible Snapchat. and do it in the fastest possible time. And the good news, therefore, is within matter of hours, the entire country can be united in this tragedy and the grief of the people of Latur, as happened when the tsunami took place in 2004-05 in Tamil Nadu. Suddenly the event, the whole country became part of it. In Latur, no one was part of it. Because how do you convey the trauma of so many thousands of people who died? There were no television cameras also of the kind that there are now. No OB vans, no mobile phones. The world has changed for the better. But it is a baton relay. It is only because people before my generation went into the media, brought out newspapers, and didn't trust me in what it used to be. Everything is now, everything is on computer. In those days, the physical pages would be laid out by people who worked in the most inhuman conditions to put the paper out. Most of the people who worked in the printing presses had terrible coughs, which is why they would go and drink in the press club. It was their way of sort of almost getting out of the horrific, those old bromide machines that they had to work with. The linotype, linotype came later, but these were hot metal machines that they worked with. I mean, there's a great book on the New York Times, which similarly, in those days, a lot of the guys would go and, how did the pubs and bars come into those streets where New York Times was? Because all the printing press guys needed to come and have a drink. From there you come to having all your papers can now go through computers, everything is mechanized. But don't forget those guys who sat on the hot metal. Similarly, don't forget the cricketers who sat on a railway platform. Don't forget entrepreneurs in a previous generation who had to work in a license permit Raj. Desperately craving for a license. I'm reading this wonderful book of Narendra Modi and Sudha Murthy. And what Narendra Modi went through to actually build Infosys is just a story and a half. And it is the India story. They had some advantages, perhaps less competition, but they also had a hell of a lot of disadvantages. And I think when you recognize and appreciate and respect yourself as being part of that journey, you'll just be a better entrepreneur.
Any questions? You guys will take a couple of questions. If anyone has, you can just raise your hand and we'll get the mic to you.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear your entire journey, but the statistical proof which I got from it, that when you advise somebody else, you give wrong advice. आप खुद को तो सब सही advice दे रहे हो, सही सारी जगहों पे सही जगह पे आप थे. What is that secret? Every place you always get.
Oh, ऐसा नहीं है. There are many stories that I missed also. So it's not as if every time. I'll give you the classic example that I missed. Again, 1991. The early 90s are a terrific time. 1991 elections, April, May, terrible summer elections in India, general elections of 91. And I had come back from Nagpur again by train. Times of India never used to pay for anything. You virtually had to come second class train. So I had gone to cover a Rajiv Gandhi rally. So Rajiv Gandhi ji ki rally hui, and I was coming back by train, came home, and I was dead tired. Bahut garmi thi. Vidarbha can be very hot. And I come back, and in those days no mobile. I told my mother I'm taking the phone off the hook because I'm very tired. I don't want any disturbance. She said, okay, put the phone, your choice. Next morning, I go to the door to pick up the paper as is my habit at 6:30. 8-column headline. Rajiv Gandhi assassinated. I put the phone receiver back, rang up my editor. I said, sir, this happened. He blasted me. Where were you? We were going to send you to Chennai. I said, sir, but how can a journalist take the phone off the hook? You are like a doctor on call, and this is pre-24/7 breaking news, but even then, Darren DeMonte, lovely man, tells me this. I couldn't cover the story. Maybe destiny willed otherwise. But I learned a lesson that day. You're a doctor on call. You're almost like a doctor on call. You never know what tomorrow brings. And I missed covering the Rajiv Gandhi story. I mean, I'm not saying it's a story you want to cover someone's body's blown into bits, and it was the Chennai Bureau's story really. It was their story in that sense, but it would have been another life experience for me. When you're young, you just want as many life experiences as possible. So I've not always been at the right place at the right time. No one is. No one is. If anyone tells you they're in the right place, as I said, Gujarat 2002 was probably being in the wrong place. Had I known that Narendra Modi is going to be Prime Minister for 10 years, I would have thought otherwise. Asking all those questions, I would have thought otherwise. But that's life. Even with Mr. Modi, the fact is in the late 1990s, if you ever ask anyone, which of these BJP leaders will become the next Prime Minister, and I'd put all those names, Mr. Modi would have been in the second rung of them. At the top would have been Pramod Mahajan. From here, but guess what? Shot by his own brother. And thereby dies as in his sort of prime, as you would want to call it. Who is to say destiny? Somebody has decided. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's not a question, just a statement. It's okay.
No.
Yeah, my voice is very annoying. Oh, okay, I'm so sorry. So it's like just a statement out there. I know you said you hang out with younger people, but the grip you have over the males in my family, like my dad and my grandpa, is like amazing. Like I literally had to fight with him for a remote, but he was so obsessed with you that I could not watch cartoons at that time. It was that bit. I think you were like a conversation for them. In marriages, aunties would gossip and the old people would like just gather around and talk about you. And nowadays they don't even go to the channels.
Madam, I'll tell you the reason for it.
Yeah.
We came up in the TV monopoly age.
Yeah.
You had no option but हमें देखना पड़ता था. And I'll give you an example. You see, this is where the world, today's generation should know. The 1996 elections. That's why I'm obsessed in a way with election. 1996 elections. We were at NDTV, private broadcaster, but the election was being covered on Doordarshan. And how many days? It was no electronic voting. Entire counting would take 3 days. And over the 3 days, how would Doordarshan cover it? They would every top of the hour do us for half an hour and then go to see a film. You would see Mughal-e-Azam. So it was a 3-day exercise, right? But because there was only Doordarshan and because we were there, your parents and anyone had no option. Wahi dekhta, wo remote bhi nahi tha. We are from the generation where there was no remote. In fact, I feel sorry for my young friends today. I keep telling them, ab aap star us tarah se nahi ban sakte. Not because you're not better, but because now people have options. So in 1996, imagine for 3 days, the entire country is watching the counting of elections in between films. Films are long Hindi and all the top films, so you have to see the film also. So you see all the top old Hindi films, Sholay dikha do, Andaz dikha do, you see top films, and then for 1 hour you watch Prannoy Roy and Vinod Dua, who are again masters. I would not be where I am without Prannoy Roy. He was the pioneer. And I respect him hugely for that. Had he not taken the whole idea that I can show elections on TV and I can create these graphics, where would people like me be? So I see him as a guru. And we all have mentors, gurus, people who guide us. None of us can be anywhere we are without them. My father's guru was, one of the people who helped him was Vinu Mankad. I mean, many of you don't know, but he could be in any all-time India cricket 11. And my father went as this young boy from Goa to play at Hindu Gymkhana, scores 80 runs, 8-0. Vinu Mankad comes to him and says, I am making you a member of the club. So my father says, sir, but I don't have the money, I think, to be a member. He said, Kisne manga aapko paise? He said, I will make you the member. And he takes him to the secretary and says, I want this boy to play from tomorrow for Hindu Gymkhana. Isse paisa koi nahi lega, no fees will be charged. And Vinu Mankad had that aura that Hindu Gymkhana would do what he wanted. Now think about it. Everybody gets some benefactor, some godfather, some mentor. Nothing wrong in having that. That's what you need at life. You need that leg up. And I was, fortunate that Prannoy Roy came into my life in '94 and gave me this break, which I would have otherwise never got. Yes. Sorry for the long answer.
So I think understanding the pulse of the young crowd, I'm not as young as them, I've got 18, 19 years of experience in
You're
the
looking about
industry.
18, yeah?
No, thanks to that, but I'm just shaved and come. So as the name stands, Bombay Founders Club. So as a founder, there are two ways in my entire journey. One is you go for glory, you retire with your company, which is Narendra Modi, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg. What happens along the journey is a lot of sharks come in, whales come in, what happened to you? So your whole arc, suppose that same thing, hostile takeover or whatever it is, it's your child, it's your baby. If something like that happens to any of us, including the youngsters, how do you battle the hostile takeover kind of a thing where because you're disrupting something, I'm in the verge of disrupting something. So as a pearl of wisdom, what would you give that? How do you stand and retire with your company?
First of all, I forgot you called it Bombay Founders Club. Have you got permission from Raj Thackeray and all these guys to use Bombay and not Mumbai? They haven't told you, Mumbai, which is good. It's a sign of the time that people have got used to having both Mumbai and Mumbai. But to answer your question, it's a great question. Because trust me, when the Ambanis came and took over the company in May 2014, and I resigned a month later, it took me 6 months to just deal with the fact that, as you said, your baby is lost. Not only that, I wanted to say a farewell to the staff here in Mumbai, the Mumbai staff. I came down to Mumbai and the office's HR team said, sir, you can't come here. So we had to organize some small place where they had this farewell. But that's, many companies, once they're taken over, feel that they now have the right over employees. It's something which I've never come to terms with, but I wrote a book. So my way of adjusting, I sat and wrote this book, The Election That Changed India, because it changed my life in a way. So you find ways, right? When I'm depressed in the night, I listen to Kishore Kumar. There is something magic in that man, and I listen to the same songs, not that I listen, but those same 100 songs that man has are enough to set you up for the day. Or I'll watch an old innings of Tendulkar or Gavaskar and think that, life can be, every time you watch Sachin Tendulkar bat, you feel good about life. There's something that he brought to the game of sport. But each one of us has our own way of dealing with trauma. As I said, this life story, think of all these life stories. हम तो केवल hostile takeover हुआ है. Think about those who suffer. Look, think about today a family in Wayanad. An entire family being wiped out. I see this story today of 4 toddlers who were saved, but their parents have died. We have to put things in perspective. Not easy. As I said, it was traumatic for me. It will be traumatic for any young guy tomorrow in this room. But you deal with it, right? But,
Could you have done things differently, like raising capital from somewhere else? Like
I could have, yeah.
Adani, the way he's come back, so similarly.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I should have sat with Mukesh Bhai and had a conversation. I had a decent relationship, so I should have. But look, hindsight is hindsight. I think everyone should again chart their own journeys of how to deal with situations. Different people are made differently. Some people simply don't want to compromise on certain core ethics. Other people believe that, let's look at the bigger picture. To each one his own, or her. Fortunately, her now as much as his, which is terrific to see more and more women in this room. And women make better journalists, by the way, than men. They are more empathetic, for starters. And they tend to take less shortcuts. I'm saying as a generic principle. Guys tend to sort of fit their way. I've seen with my younger reporters, the women reporters are far more diligent and far more empathetic. If I was asked to send 2 people of equal skill level, if I had to hire them, I would always take the woman over the man. Sorry to say that, but that is not, also because I think newsrooms should be gender diverse. I remember when I joined the Times of India, there were just 2 women in that entire newsroom of about 100 people. Today in television newsrooms, it's about 40-60, which is great. I think the missing link, and this is controversial, is we don't have enough Dalits, Adivasis, OBCs. I know the moment you enter caste, people say, "Arey yaar caste," but it's true. I meet now, and these are great guys. There's a huge revolution, courtesy YouTube, taking place among Dalit influencers. They all get 10 lakh views to their videos. This whole Samvidhan Khatre Mein Hai, which the Congress made their sort of plank, and they helped them to win in many places the election with Dalit vote, was not because of them, it was the YouTubers. So YouTube has transformed newsrooms and made them more diverse. But I'm just saying that diversity is something we should all encourage in our professions. Whatever we do in spaces that we are, I think more diverse we are, the stronger we are. The strongest newsrooms or the strongest businesses, particularly consumer facing, will be those that are the most diverse.
Yeah, I think we have time for one last question.
According to you, what is the most challenging situation you have faced and you have overcome?
I think I said that. I think losing a network that I had built was easily the most traumatic experience at a personal level, at a professional level. Covering a story was the Mumbai riots of 92-93. To see the city that I had grown up with, this wonderful, wonderful city, being divided on Hindu-Muslim lines is something I have never really come to fully terms with. And I remember also that in 2008, when the terror attack took place here, I lost a couple of school friends from Campion who were again shot dead in the Oberoi. And apparently, one of the people while shooting these guys had said, "Aapne hamari masjid girai." This was 2008. The Babri Masjid had been demolished in 92. I find it very difficult, that's why I'm sorry to say this, to celebrate anything with that event, and including the Ram Temple. I went to Ayodhya this time in April. All my cameramen and all wanted to go and have darshan. I am not a believer, sadly. I don't believe in an individual God, I believe in just somebody up there. But I'm reminded of 92 somehow. And I have never come to terms with what happened in 92. I didn't. It's the innocent who lose lives. The politicians flourish across party lines. I don't want to make any political statement here. But in general, politicians tend to benefit from the blood of others, especially when it comes to religion. I think the worst thing you can do is ask for votes on grounds of religion and caste, and particularly religion in this country. Caste, unfortunately, is a reality. And caste consciousness, but both. I mean, I would say any marker of your identity. Judge yourself as an Indian. Judge people for who they are, for the struggles they do. And I'll say this as a final point, this is the greatest country in the world because this is at the moment the most aspirational country in the world. And all you need to do to make India realize its dreams is none of what our netas say, give Indians equal opportunity. Make sure that every Kendriya Vidyalaya is open to everyone. My driver's son must have the same right to get into a Kendriya Vidyalaya as maybe a high-end government employee has. The day you do that, this country will be transformed. And we just haven't invested enough in providing equal opportunity for health and education. These are the two critical markers. It required COVID for us to wake up to some of the inequalities that exist in the health sector, or indeed in digital education. Between those, it's very easy to say, ghar se work from home or do schooling from home. How does a kid who doesn't have an access to to these smart mobiles compete with someone else who does? And we don't think about these questions. What have we done really to bridge the digital divide? And that, is an aside, but that is my dream for this country, that we are this remarkably talented, aspirational society where every father and mother wants their kids to do better than them, and they will break every door possible. Why can't we just open more doors for them more easily? And maybe many of you could look for businesses that can do that, because I believe those will succeed. Don't work in silos. This country has too many people who build bridges. दीवार तोड़ दो और bridge बांधो. The bridge builders will be the Indians of the future. And I again give you a final example. In '95, when we got this contract to do a program for Doordarshan, we had a choice of doing the program in English or Hindi. Dr. Roy, because he was more familiar with English, chose the English language. Arun Puri of India Today was left with no choice. Since he was given the second choice, he had to take Hindi. He was not comfortable with it. But guess what? Aaj Tak makes 500 crores. NDTV would make 150. Why? Because Hindi had a much larger market. But in the 1990s, you still thought, "Yare, Hindi kaun karega?" Actually, the future of this country in the media lies in regional. Because regional taps into all the energies. We have a Marathi channel that I advise here called Mumbai Tak as part of it. Just see the responses we get to that and compare it with what we get in English. I did one program on Shiv Sena on Mumbai Tak. I went to Shiv Sena office 2 years ago during that whole trial when the government was being toppled. Are sir, tumhara aadmi kaal bagitla. Kuthe the Mumbai Tak. No English bugger. He's happy watching OTT, watching Netflix. So I mean, when you build, don't have this sense that ye Hindi wala hai, ye Marathi wala hai. They are your taqat. In your businesses also, find ways to break out of silos and discover new audiences, new consumers, and you will be surprised, and they will surprise you. Thank you.
And we have a huge round of applause for Mr. Sardesai.
Thank you. But I wish each and every one of you to fulfill your dreams, and I hope you will go from strength to strength. I remember Devar said at the start that the problem with groups like this is they lose interest after 5 minutes. And therefore you have to have games and other things to keep them entertained. I'm glad that many of you didn't leave. So thank you.
I think this was the event for which we've had the most registration so far, and I think that's just a testament to Mr. Sardesai's charisma. I remember I had dropped him a WhatsApp at 11 a.m. cold message, my first one ever to him. He said, call me at 10 p.m. 10:03 he was confirmed as the keynote. So he's been extremely kind, to support Bombay Founders Club and what we're doing here. And yeah, I just want to take a moment to thank him. He's come all the way from Kolkata and Delhi in between a lot of things. So thank you so much, sir. Once again.
And don't forget to read the book. It comes out in October sometime between Dussehra and Diwali. It should be called 2024, the election that surprised India. And it's a story you should read, especially the chapter on COVID and how the government dealt or failed to deal with COVID and how a lot of people got away with what I believe was complete negligence. But that's just one part of it. But do read it. It has the positives and the negatives. And it has 10 stories of hope. A lot of your generation believes some neta chor hai. So I have these 10 stories of hope, of these incredible stories, and your generation should look at them because many of them crowdfunded their campaigns, and some of them actually had the Instagram edge over their rivals. And there's this great story of a guy called Rajkumar Raut. He heads a biker gang of tribals in Baswara district of Rajasthan on the border with Gujarat. Contesting against Rajkumar was a guy called Malviya or something, some congressman who had joined the BJP 1 month earlier, spent as much money as he could on the campaign. Rajkumar defeated him by 2.5 lakh votes. And among the things that Rajkumar did was get the young on his side. I believe there are 2 demographics that you need to win Indian elections now. Young and women. You can't win an Indian election unless the Mahila is with you. You can possibly win an election sometimes without the Yuva. Mahila to aapko chahiye chahiye. That's why they're throwing all these schemes. Even Mr. Shinde has woken up to the reality now. But Rajkumar Raut's story is interesting because the minister had the convoys, the money, the power. Uske paas kya tha? Mere paas meri bike hai aur mera Instagram hai. Every video of his would go viral on Instagram. And he was a youth sensation. You should ever meet him. He comes in jeans, has t-shirts saying New York, and wants a separate Bhil Pradesh. for the tribals. But why not, right? He's a political entrepreneur like you, and he's doing it in the space of politics. And he crowdfunded a lot of his campaign. And there are these 10 stories of these 10 people, some of whom crowdfunded, but all of them show that in India, one thing people don't like, voters don't like, and this is another tip to you in life, ahankar. Arrogance has no place in public life or private life, I believe. You may reach the very top, don't forget where you started off from. And that's a life lesson to politicians that I think the voter has given. A lot of people who lost this election, and I'll give you the example again of Smriti Irani in Amethi. She lost to someone whom she called, "Arey, wo to Gandhi family ka clerk hai." He may well be, but a clerk also has an identity. और clerk की खासियत मालूम है क्या है? जो भी ऑफिस के अंदर और बाहर जाता है, clerk को जरूर मिलता है. The clerk knew everybody's name. The mantri did not. And sometimes in India, the person who knows किसका birthday है, किसके घर में मातम है, किसके घर में शादी है, is often the politician who's far more successful than someone who believes I have arrived in life and I don't need to meet people. And it's a lesson for all of us in life. Stay grounded, because who knows what tomorrow brings. Thank you. Thank you.
Wish you grand success.
Devansh has to ensure each of you pick up 10 copies.
Rajdeep, thank you so much for a lovely evening and keeping us all entertained. I'd like to give my vote of thanks to Rajdeep for bringing up things that most of you weren't even born, like he said at that time, and if you were, you must have been 3-4 years old. So I keep going back to when my children were 2 and 3 years old, and we missed their school interview during the riots because of the riots, etc. And we have actually lived through it. I have lived through it. I was right next to, I wouldn't have survived today had I not had a friend coming over for lunch at the Ribbon Club on that Friday when the bomb blast happened. I was at the snooker table and the ball went away from my cue just before I broke my set because the blast affected the entire space. I looked out of the balcony and I saw people running helter-skelter like cattle, totally red with blood. There was like, you know, it's a sight that will not get out of your mind. And the first thing that came to me is, where is my dad? Because he was like 70 years old at the time, and he was in the office, which was across the road from the Bombay Stock Exchange. And there were no mobile phones, like you said. So you guys are really, I'm the generation, we are the generation where we've had no television. We had to wait 6 years for a phone connection in our house. If we applied for a phone connection, it was 6 years, right, Rajdeep? At that time. And it cost a princely sum of 30 rupees to apply for a phone connection.
You had to be in a queue for long distance calls.
Yeah, we had to go to the post office if we went to Matharan, and we had to inform our parents. We sent, like you said, a telegram from the post office, or we had to wait for a lightning call, person-to-person call, and we would come back at a specific time and make that call for like 20 paisa, 30 paisa to our parents, saying we have arrived in Matharan safely. So that's what our parents went through, and it brings back memories. I've been in the printing line myself, Rajdeep, I still am, and I have worked on these hot metal machines. Like you said, people went for a drink from the printing press because most of them got lead poisoning. All the types that were made of lead, and these people were, you know, breathing in the fumes on a daily basis. And most of the people working in the typesetting department, that's how I started my life in the printing industry, in the typesetting department. My dad owned a printing press. We had the mono machines and the lino machine for hot types. And I started my business with photo typesetting, which became much easier, where everything was wanted yesterday, instead of the 3 months it normally took to do it in the old process. But he's brought back memories for me, and I think I should tell you guys that you're really lucky that you've come into an age where you have everything in the palm of your hand. we had to import machines. First IBM, I had the first, what they call the 486 or the PCXT. I had the first machine that had a hard drive. And I had to keep it under 18 degrees Celsius in my office because the hard drive would heat up. And that machine cost $1,75,000 with a 20 MB hard drive. And I'm talking about 38, 40 years ago, at least 38 years ago. So that's the difference in today, and where you pay less than that for your phone that has so many TV in your phone, or so many GB in your phone that we had nothing to do with at that time. So thank you very much, Rajdeep, for giving us all your insights and doing it so beautifully. Thank you once again.
Sorry, just two last logistical announcements, and then I promise you the mic stuff will be over. Okay? Guys, the games are now going to be open. Please feel free to play. Right, for all of those of you all who come to Bombay Founders Club meet up for the first time, right, this is not a business networking space. This is not a space where we exchange business cards. This is a place where we make meaningful connections. If you all are feeling incredibly privileged after hearing Mr. Sardesai and Mr. Bartley Boy talk about their era, I'm going to make you all feel a little more privileged. There is an after party at Bar Stock Exchange where the usual, debauchery can go on, since we've not been able to do it at this venue today. I've heard a lot of founders come and tell me the analysis of other startups increases manifold after 2 Bombay Sapphire shots. So we shall put that to the test. Well, thank you everyone for braving this rainy day and coming.